Welcome everyone to the second talk of this fifth edition of the Legacy of Socrates. Now I have the pleasure to have Sabrina Leandro with me. Um, Sabrina is a technical leader. She has a lot of experience in product development processes, system designs, and management. And when it comes to legacy systems, the decision making is very important, and being able to communicate with the business is a skill that we tend to lack. And with this talk, so how to rewrite a bit at a time, Sabrina will tackle a bit of this. And this topic, like rewrite, is a very common topic, and we have discussed that already in the past editions with Stranglefig pattern and how not to rewrite and refactor instead. Sabrina here will share her experience on how to approach this, but incrementally, and how to communicate the value of this with the business. I think it's really good, and that she has really a lot of advice that are inspiring. So, without further ado, Sabrina, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, I'm super happy to talk about this topic with you today. I'm going to share some lessons that I've learned running big rewrite projects. So I am currently a principal engineer at Intercom, and we're hiring, by the way. But this talk is drawn from my experience working at Songkick a few years ago. Songkick is a live music platform, and we notify you when artists that you love come to town, and obviously now they also do live streams, right? So when I worked there, I had the chance to run three major rewrite projects for very different products. The first one was for Songkick.com itself. We were rewriting a monolithic application into services, like front ends and services. And then Songkick merged with another company, and we inherited a bunch of great things, but also a rewrite of a ticket store that was in progress, kind of. And then also an internal tools application for back office management that was in need of a lot of love. So I'll reference those examples throughout the talk. So I had another talk about this first rewrite for Songkick. So this talk has a different alternative title, which is Big Rewrite Strikes Again. This original title is based on this band, the Smiths. So with kind of Morrissey views aside, I'm reclaiming the Smiths and my love for John Marr. So I'm gonna use the song titles from the Smiths throughout this talk because they fit really perfectly with the topic, and also Songkick is a music company, so it kind of really fits. So if you know them and you spot the titles throughout the song, you might get a nice playlist right at the end. Anyway, that's my Songkick Smiths pitch. So I'll talk through the problem, like why we need this, how to start this kind of project, how to run it, how to finish it, and then hopefully, most importantly, how to never need this kind of project again. So let's start with the problem. Everyone here is really great at their jobs, I'm sure. Like we're building great products, we're writing really good code, right? All amazing. But somehow our code seems to have a life of its own, right? It just kind of follows this inevitable path to disorder and growing way too much and becoming really hard to change. Why is that? Well, this is an application that you might have shipped to production. It's all nice and organized and small, and customers are happy, they're using it, and you might consider that project done at this point. But really, while your project might be finished, the code that you wrote, it's only really done when it's not really running in production anymore and no one is using it. In the meantime, it's going to be forever changing. So either you're going to change requirements or you discover bugs, or even if you don't change anything, like the frameworks or APIs that you use around you are going to change. So you have to change the software, or maybe the users, you get more users than you can handle. You need to scale your system. So things will change around it. And all that time, the software entropy or the disorder in your software is growing. If you disregard that entropy, you're going to accumulate features, dependencies, and code until it's too hard to make any changes. In the case of the ticket store internal tools application that I was talking about, we didn't have enough tests and not enough structure in the code, so it made it really hard to change and understand it and really risky to make any changes there. And in the case of the Songkick.com, it was kind of on the other side of the spectrum. It was an application that had lots and lots of features built over time. It was a little bit over-engineered, and I can say that because I worked on it, and had tons of tests, but they were really slow to run. So that made it really hard to change as well. Sarah may use this metaphor, which I really like, to explain code like that. So both the under-engineered and the over-engineered. This hoarder's house. There are great and useful things in there. Like, you can know that there are things in there that are great and valuable, but they're hidden by all the mess and the unused stuff that you have, that you haven't cleaned out throughout the years. The main thing, like, you can walk around it, but if you do, it's really risky, and it's really risky to move around and change anything in this hoarder's house. So, something needs to be done. Like, think of this hoarder's house, really, really dangerous. So if only you could throw everything away, start with a fresh set of furniture, declutter everything, like everything will be perfect, right? And it's a big project, it will take time, and it will impact delivery of other features that you want to do it, but it's needed, right? So great, congratulations, you're about to embark on a big rewrite project. But before you start, ask yourself 2 questions, like, is it the right time to do it, and is it the right reason to do it? There is a point in time where it pays off to invest in maintainability, but before that, it might be worth focusing on kind of getting your product to market faster. So at Songkick, we call them like the 2 distinct product development modes. So the discovery mode or delivery mode. During discovery, the main goal is to learn as quickly as we can, validate ideas, and discover like a feature market fit. Like, is this valuable or not? Once that value is proven, then we do product delivery. And during this phase, focusing on stabilizing, making sure the product or the feature can be changed and extended easily and confidently is really important. So is it the right time? Product delivery, like during that phase, is when investment in tech and making something more maintainable is really could really be useful, right? So it only makes sense to invest in a big technical project like this if it's a product that has proven value to the business today. So before, is it the right reason? Right? So before you go out to ask for time to do this work and potentially pausing adding any new features to this product, make sure that you have a clear reason for it and it's not just like an exercise in technology, right? Just something that you want to do for yourself. So first, find the business case for this project. And if you're unsure how, just talk to business stakeholders, right? Try to understand the value that technology is bringing and this product is bringing to the business. And then you can try to articulate how the current legacy system that you're trying to rewrite is preventing that value from happening or blocking it or making it difficult. So if you can't explain the reason for this rewrite project to someone outside of technology, then you don't have a good enough reason yet. So keep digging and trying to understand it better. So is it the right reason? Yes, if it's a clear business case for it. So yeah, we're not hired to just write code, right? We're hired to deliver value. So in whatever form it takes in the organization you work for. So first try to understand where that comes from. Yeah, it's my favorite slide. So you want this, the value for it and it's the right time, but how do you sell it, right? How do you get to, whoever decides how time and money is spent in your company to give you the time and the space that you need to do this work? How do you sell it? First one, have a clear business case. So luckily you did your homework, right? From the previous question, like you have a clear business goal for it and it makes sense to everyone in the company, not just people in the engineering department. And the other reason why it's really great to have one goal is that you'll have to make lots of hard decisions throughout this project. So having this one clear business goal will help you prioritize work and make those decisions. The other thing that you can do is try to create an excitement on what this new world will be. So it's not just about making the code not bad or kind of just making things a little bit better. It's about what you'll be able to do once this work is done. So make it about how this will be like a transformation to the company and show what a great new world it will be once you have this done. And find allies in other departments. So I'm sure there might be other folks as frustrated as you are by this lack of change. So this will help you by having them advocating for your project as well once they see the value that it will bring to them and help them make their jobs better. Another way to try to help sell it is to make the pain visible. So I think there's always like an expectation mismatch between how easy like a small quick change to this legacy project should be and how easy it actually is, like how hard it actually is. And you know that because you've seen the code, right? You have that experience, but you need to help others that aren't so close to the code to see that too. So be creative in how you communicate that without going into too much technical detail, right? So these diagrams that I have here I did some very terrible Google drawing diagrams for the internal tools and the ticket store projects, kind of trying to highlight which areas of the product were harder to change and which ones were easier, like in red and green kind of thing. And it was very rough, but it really helped give a sense for which projects were harder to change and also which ones were easier to change so that we could focus kind of the near-term goals of the business in those areas while we cleaned up the areas that needed cleaning. And also use lots of metaphors. So I've used some already with the hoarder's house, urban planning, gardening, personal hygiene, all those kind of metaphors that are about maintenance and making things better a little bit at a time. They really help. So find the ones that kind of resonate with people in your company. Yes, this is about do repeat yourself, please, all the time. So it's not going to be after like a magical half-hour presentation that you get all the buy-in that you need for this project, right? It will take time and persistence and repetition of the message. So have a clear message when you're communicating, adapt to different audiences, but try to use the same kind of graphs and metaphors and diagrams, like the same message across all the communications that you have. Pick a cool project name too, like branding really helps. Yes, you do have to repeat yourself. I can't remember, how many times I did presentations about that ticket stores and internal tools projects to very many different audiences. And it was really necessary to get everyone on board. Sometimes I was kind of tired of repeating myself, but actually other people might not be. So you just need to repeat that message. Run Q&A sessions, presentations, show and tell. Make sure that you're out there kind of selling the project because frame it as not just an engineering project, but a company-wide project and investment. So the whole company is on your side and you're ready to start. But do you know where you're going? And for that, you need kind of a technical vision for the future. So you have the now there, all the red. What does that look like in the future? This vision doesn't need to be super detailed. The purpose really is to show an overview of the current state and what the future will look like and what guiding principles you're going to use to get there. The architecture of your system is not going to be set in stone. You're not going to completely understand everything from the get-go, right? So it's a process that you'll be discovering as you go through this project. But it's good to have guiding principles and more or less where you're trying to get. And make sure that everyone in your group and in your team that are running this project understand that and are aligned on that. So how do you get that from that current state to your vision of the future? So your first approach may be, let's throw it all away, right? Start from scratch, a greenfield project, right? What a dream. So what does it look like when you're rewriting from scratch? So usually when you're running from scratch, there are two teams, right? You have one team going out and building this new, the new application, right? The greenfield project. And then while another team is maintaining the legacy application. So with time, eventually the new application is done and then you can deprecate the legacy one. Yeah, but you need to keep maintaining the legacy application throughout this whole time because, it's bringing all the value. So obviously you can just turn it off, right? So a positive of this approach is that a greenfield project is easy to think about. It's all shiny and new. There's no baggage holding you back, maybe. But there are many issues with this approach. And I think the biggest one is that value is only delivered right at the very end, right? And if you don't know if you're building the right thing, if it's easy to maintain, if it's even the product that your customers still want, you only discover these answers once the whole project is fully done. And it also makes it really difficult to switch priorities, right? Until this is truly done, you can't, the investment that you made hasn't paid off yet. And when eventually you want to add a new feature to this application, because the new one is not done yet, you have to add to the legacy application that you want to delete. So it just feels like the priorities are wrong here, right? I think this is one of the reasons why this kind of rewrite from scratch never finish. When faced with business priority changes, companies will focus on what helps them survive. And if it's a project that's been going on forever and not delivering value, no one's going to invest on that. The rewriting from scratch is a waterfall of these kind of rewrites, right? And we don't build products like that anymore. So why should we approach technical migrations in the same way? So Nicholas mentioned this before, I'm sure everyone heard this, but there is another way of doing that. Martin Fowler coined a migration approach, the strangler fig pattern application. So this metaphor comes from trees that start going in the upper branches of another tree until they work their way down to the soil. So this strangler fig is your new application, kind of gradually replacing the legacy one. So what does that look like? In this approach, you can have one team, right? Or at least one lane of work, carving out the rewritten functionality from the existing system to a new one. So it's kind of like this. So in this approach, doesn't necessarily mean that you're rewriting within the same project or even using the same technology. I think you can think about in web applications, for example, you can link between different applications. That works really well. But because of that, it's more complicated to understand while the rewrite is in progress, because you have to understand the legacy application and then understand how to connect the two. But the huge positive here is that you can get value out of this new system right from the start. And you're testing the complete end-to-end delivery of this application. So this means communicating with all the areas of the company about this project, checking that it works well in production, migrating users and data, monitoring, and so on. This also means that there's an incentive to pick features that are by business priority instead of whatever the developer wants to do first. And then when that requirement for a new feature comes in, you can add to the new application at any point here because it's already ready to go. So we've used this pattern many times, and I really, really recommend it. And one example here was the internal tools, the back office application that I mentioned. So we took end-to-end slices of the legacy application, focusing on user flows per department. We prioritized by the ones that were used more frequently and they were causing the most pain, obviously, as the application had some technical debt, but also product and design debt as well. So in the example here, we have a page to manage orders and a page to manage customers. We would build a new customer flow in the new application, still using the same database at first. At this point, we can release it to production and ask the end users, in this case, it was our customer support team, to try it out. They provided some feedback, we made some small tweaks, and once they were happy with it, we would redirect all the users to this new application. And then we went around and repeated it for each of the flows. And we moved from the legacy application one as well. So once this strangler fig pattern allows you to adapt and change direction, it has better cost management, and you can pause at any time in this process, and you'll still have something better than what you had before. Yes, so during that Suncake.com rewrite, I mentioned that Suncake had lots and lots of features, right? It was a pretty bloated application. We were trying to find product market fit, and we added lots of different features to see what would stick, what customers wanted. So releasing changes got harder and harder, and it was hard to tell what was valuable still or what wasn't anymore. Our first attempt at the rewrite failed miserably, like even though we were following the strangler fig pattern, because we were reevaluating like every corner of the website as we were rewriting it. So we didn't go very far like that. Like, so every time that we looked at a new page or a feature, we would check in with product and design folks and see, is this the right thing? Like, is this really needed? This is really hard to maintain. Can we simplify it? Or is this a bug or a feature? Like, those are questions that we were asking ourselves all the time. And it was making it very slow. So we realized that we needed to use that rewrite as an opportunity to review the whole product. What we really wanted is to finish as quickly as possible, and a great way to finish faster is to reduce scope, right? And only focus on rewriting what's really needed. So we did a reset of the rewrite project, and with our product owner and design leads, we went through the process of identifying what was Songcake's main proposition, like why users kept coming back. And for Songcake was to track your favorite artists so you never miss them live. So all the features that powered that proposition we classified as must-haves. So for that, we definitely have to rewrite. Improvements on that proposition, we called it should-haves, and then everything else was a won't-have. So this was a framework that we used to identify the value of features and help prioritize and cut that work in a time-box project that we had. So to highlight here is that we aligned the product's main proposition, its reason to exist, to the tasks that we needed to deliver, right? And we only did those, right? So that was our rationale in deciding what is a must-have or a should-have. And then the won't-haves were really like won't-haves. It wasn't would like to have later, right? We really dropped them and didn't bring them back to the new application. We didn't leave anything just in case. So I think this is one of the main reasons why that was a successful rewrite in the end. We weren't trying to rebuild everything. We had a guiding principle in this framework, so we could get on with the rewrite without having to second guess ourselves. So like ask this question, right? If you're starting over today with what you know today, what would you build now? Cool. Okay, so now the project is going strong, right? You're rewriting one flow at a time. Here are some things to keep in mind. One thing at a time. So you have one main goal that I mentioned, right? So you want to achieve with this project. So use that to find your biggest blocker, create a realistic plan to remove it, and then do it completely. This is how you avoid having lots of kind of half-finished attempts at rewriting that end up creating even more complexity and making it even harder to maintain, right? There will be lots of things that you'll notice that you want to do, like, but maybe just take notes of those for to come back later and focus completely on doing just one at a time. So for that ticket store application that I mentioned in 2016, our biggest blocker was decommissioning that ticket store. It was a rewrite from scratch that we inherited when we merged with another company. And it was in that proverbial like 80% done, but the 20% to complete was not even like it was taking over 80% to get it finished. There was no end in sight. So what we did was apply that must-haves, won't-haves framework to understand what was important to finish. We only did the must-haves, like really the bare minimum. And then together with the sales team, we created a plan to migrate all clients still using that old legacy ticket store to migrate to the new one. It was really hard work and it required a lot of collaboration, like mostly non-technical work. Like it required a lot of collaboration with our sales team and our customers to understand what was blocking them from doing the change. But it really needed to be done for us to unblock ourselves and move to the new ticket store that was really a lot better than the legacy one. I'm speaking of it. So celebrate your project. So during this project, you'll be making lots of behind the scenes technical changes, but don't forget that this is a company-wide investment, right? So make sure that everyone's excited about what you're achieving and kind of can understand that, right? Instead of just looking at charts or numbers. So when that legacy ticket store that I mentioned was finally decommissioned, it was celebrated with a lovely obituary written by the original developer and the product manager for that project. And this is a representation of the ticket store near where the office used to be. So it was really sweet, like what they wrote. And it was a great celebration of a new beginning, but also a celebration and an acknowledgement of the great value that legacy project had brought to the company. And we had a designer, Tonke Karim, who created a game around the Strangler Fig project of the internal tools application. So he is really amazing. He mapped the team's goals and metrics to badges and achievements. So some of my favorites here. So table smasher for the number of removed deprecated tables. And then this one is the force shift one. So this is the percentage of the new product versus the legacy one. So how many users are using the new product versus the legacy one. So the metric wasn't really numbers of lines of codes rewritten, but really how many users were using the new app. And it helped really us focus on the most impactful flows first. And they also printed the badges next to the wall in the office, if you remember offices. And like each achievement will also have like a party popper, extra excitement when achievement was unlocked, we would all hear. So that was really cool and a great way to get the team motivated and to make sure that everyone could see the progress that they were making. So then repeat yourself again. It's a long project, right? It's not going to be a week, definitely, right? So make sure that you keep going back to that vision and that goal that you had and update the teams and the company with the progress and remind everyone on why we're doing this work and why it's important. Okay, how to finish? I guess you won't finish it, at least not completely, and at least not everything that you want to do, right? And that's okay. Like priorities will change. You won't have enough time to do everything that you want to do. It's fine. And that's why you take an iterative approach, like the Strangler Fig application. That's why you break it down as much as you can and deliver end-to-end slices as much as you can and pick the changes with the highest impact first. So within 3 months of starting that rewrite of Something.com that I mentioned, we were able to decouple the front ends and services that we had and unblock ourselves to innovate and build new products, because that's what we really wanted to do as a business. That focus time, after that, we split the teams and we had a smaller team continuing the rewrite, but it allowed us to also focus on building new products, which is what we wanted to do. So we got to a good place quickly, even though we hadn't completely finished that rewrite at that time. So yeah, this right project should be viewed as a one-time opportunity, right? It's the focus time that you have to put all your efforts into unblocking yourself as quickly as you can, but you need to find ways to keep kind of maintenance work happening under normal circumstances as well. So how to not need it again? You should use this rewrite as an opportunity to form and adapt good habits as a team. So I'm really happy to say that as far as I know, like Songkick hasn't had to do another rewrite of something.com since that project. And I was just reminding myself that it was 10 years ago that we did this. So, and that's still true as far as I know. They haven't had to change it completely, just evolve it. And the store and the internal tools improvements before I left were still in progress, but these projects are being used and new features were being added to both during their rewrites. So yeah, software entropy is a reality, right? If you're supporting software that's being used, you need to change and maintain this code. Like there's no way around it. The important thing is to keep ahead of that entropy, keep it at a manageable level, and reduce scope and the amount of code that you need to maintain when possible. And one way to do that is to kind of, I mentioned, make the pain visible, like make the cost of maintenance visible as well. We know that maintaining software has a cost, but maybe for the rest of the company, they're just thinking about the current project that you're working on, and then the cost of maintaining the existing code that you have might not be as visible. So find ways to highlight that. Again, at Songkick, as I mentioned, we had built many applications throughout the years, but it wasn't always clear what level of maintenance they were expected to have. So I started something super simple, but just writing down a list of applications that we had, like an application inventory of everything that we had, and then discuss with product managers what level of maintenance we expected to be doing for those. So, for example, we're actively working on it, or we're not touching it unless it's on fire. But just having that clarity and having the list of things that you own and need to maintain, making that visible was really helpful. As I mentioned before, code is only finished when it's not running in production anymore, right? So make sure that the code that you have is bringing enough value to justify its maintenance. If not, delete, right? Delete code, right? That code definitely should be deleted, like use version control, make sure that you don't keep code that's not being used around. But maybe go a step further and think about reviewing whole features and products, right? As part of the process. So as part of that maintenance level conversations at Songkick, sometimes the answer could have been, well, it's time to decommission this product. It's not bringing as much value as you thought it would. And that's fine. It's part of the life cycle of features and products, and it doesn't imply anything about your code's quality or the product quality itself. So ideally, like you as a developer should bring, the knowledge of the maintenance costs and the impact that it has on software development for you for those systems. Product managers and business folks should think about the value that it provides and the usage. And then together you can decide whether it's worth keeping those systems running, paying that cost, or whether they should be deprecated. And making those decisions together also helps make the maintenance cost visible and reduces surprises when you maybe need to invest more in maintenance for a system or for an application. So you should constantly do this reevaluation, right? Keep going back to this question. If you're starting over, what would you build today, knowing what you know now? And then maybe delete what's not that. Okay, so make it part of your day-to-day. So to keep software entropy under control, you need to be thinking about how to support those kind of day-to-day cleanups, right? So it's not the big decisions that broke your project. It's like one small decision at a time till you don't know how to make it better and you end up in that hoarder's house, right? So to avoid that, you need to be doing constant housekeeping. So create the discipline of making those small decisions, make things a bit better every day. If you refactor the right way, refactor a little bit and often. Don't ask for permission to do it. Refactor the story that you're working on today. If you're changing that code today, you're adding a feature, you're fixing a bug. It means it's a priority, right? It's already being prioritized, so it's important. So make sure that before you do the change, make that code a little bit better. Make this part of your daily habit by communicating and educating like product managers and designers that this is part of your job, right? And coach developers that, this type of change is expected to be done during the day-to-day work. So it's the a little bit and often part that's important. And another big win for us was adopting continuous delivery. We're deploying to production multiple times a day around that same time. So having continuous deployment to production and a fast release cycle was so important for us to change this mindset. It removed all the friction in making even the smallest code change and created confidence for us to just making small improvements as we went. Right? We also all worked off the main branch, so it means removing that fear of thread mergers, right? So you can see what everyone else is working on. You can go and rename a method or move a method without worrying about how it will impact, everyone else's work, because we're all working off the same branch. So these two kind of technical and process changes enabled a cultural change in the team as well. Like we had no more excuses for pushing even the smallest changes. Then finally, I guess my advice is to get used to inconsistencies, which I find very hard, but I think this is just the way of life, right? Your code is never going to be perfect. Like that vision that you have is a great thing to have and to drive towards, but you're never going to reach that. By the time you reach that, there's going to be a new vision, right? A new thing that you want to achieve. So get used to that. Like your code is never going to be that perfect state. And that's not really the goal, right? The goal is to deliver business impact. And a project that's doing that by definition is changing and evolving. So have inconsistencies. That's fine. So the important thing is to have that shared technical vision, understand and agree on where you're going towards, and make constant, a little bit and often small improvements to get there. So this talk started to be about, big rewrite projects, but really it's about how to build maintainable and sustainable technology and know when to invest in technical projects with the business context in mind. So my summary for that is, for technical migrations and rewrite projects like this, do it at the right time and with a clear business goal, iterate on delivering it, and reduce scope as much as you can. And then when you're done, keep making your code better as part of your day-to-day work. Make software maintenance costs visible and part of the business conversation. We're not hired to deliver code, right? We're hired to deliver positive business impact. So understand where that's coming from. Take responsibility for understanding that and making open-eyed decisions, knowing when to cut corners and then when to invest in maintainability and those big projects. That's my message. Thank you very much. And here are the prompts in case you missed them. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sabrina. Yeah, cool list of sounds. Okay. We already have plenty of questions, so super
nice.
excited. if you still have questions, please, you have the ask a question box that you can drop your question to, and you can also vote for the existing questions. So we're gonna start with the first most voted one, which is, how do you convince business people to remove features that are already developed but not used a lot? Yeah, I can see how hard that is.
Great question. And I'm not saying it's easy. Like, I'm saying we should try. So how to do that? I think the main point is to try to explain why it's a difficult thing to maintain, or why it's maybe slowing you down, or adding other things that you want to do, or changing and adding new features that you want to do harder or slower. I think that's the approach I'll try to take, and then compare that to the value that's bringing, either monetary value or number of users or whatever the metric that they have for business success. Try to balance, see the two, right? What is the business success and how much is it causing pain and slowness and making things hard to change, and then see is it worth it, right? That would be the start.
Yeah. And as you said during your talk, getting support from other teams maybe, and constantly, I think it's a long game of constantly talking about it and digging into the business value of it and the cost, making that visible. Yeah.
For sure. It's definitely a long game. You're right. And the more you have those conversations, the easier they get.
Yeah. True. All right. Next question is, how do you convince, again, the product that refactoring should occur constantly, so as we go, and not just when you have hit the order status. Yeah, and then it's an example of when you go dining in a restaurant, and the restaurant cleans the kitchen regularly, rather than waiting until the health inspector are ready to shut them down. So that's a cool metaphor.
I
By the way,
love that. I love that metaphor. I think they answer the question themselves. It feels like, so yeah, folks that are working in the kitchen in a restaurant, they don't ask permission, right, from the restaurant owner or from the restaurant customers to clean the kitchen, right? They're doing it as they go because they know that that's what makes them do their jobs better and be more efficient and all those things. So ideally, you shouldn't have to ask permissions for that kind of work. Obviously, you can't say like, I'm going to spend a month doing this rewrite and never talk to you again, right? You need to deliver the food, right, to the customers that are waiting for the food in the restaurant. Let's keep with that metaphor, I guess. But for the things that you can do kind of day to day and a little bit like the cleanup, like you should be doing it without having to ask for permission. I really like that metaphor. That's great.
Yeah, I agree. In my experience, also the things you can do to that is, so it's really a discussion to have with the developers in your team, and it's also how you communicate with the people. If at the stand up you are here and you say, "I'm done with the feature, but now I need to refactor and add test," you make it sound like adding test and refactoring doesn't provide value, but you need to do that extra step. So it sounds like it costs money, but it doesn't bring clear value. I think you should not say that. Instead, you should consider refactoring, tests, etc. as part of the job, and you don't really have to ask for permissions. And
Perfect.
if you follow what Sabrina said, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, it is part of considering the feature done, right? It's the definition of done is that it's tested and it's in a good state to go back to it eventually, right? When you need to. So that's perfect. Yeah.
And a little bit often, as you said, it goes invisible. You sprinkle refactoring as you go. It takes practice and teaching. Like it's a culture shift also. So you probably need to talk to your colleagues and show them that little by little. But eventually, that's how you get there. Is you don't really have to convince. It's more how you work as a team.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is, what measurements related to the code quality, technical depth, or any, would you recommend to use to be able to communicate the situation with product managers? And do you have tools in mind, for example, to do so?
Yeah, that's a great question. For those examples, unfortunately, we were at such a bad state with those projects at the time that it was pretty clear. Like we were all frustrated that we couldn't move as fast as we wanted to. So I don't recommend getting to that point, right? It feels like there should be something in between where we can track progress and maybe track trends in quality of the product. But I have to be honest that I haven't used any of I haven't used some tools, but maybe nothing that could have long term to see that the impact of those. I think it's more about experience, like developer experience and how they're feeling about the code base that I've used to keep track of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear about like if there are tools that folks here are using, like I'm really interested in.
That's a good question. If you do know tools in the chat, please put them, the audience. It reminds me of Adam talks before. So the tools you could use to assess the code base and show to non-technical people will be around like hotspot analysis, for example. That's like it's not technical. It looks like a graph of it's like a prioritization tool, and they know how to prioritize, so you can use that. And as you just said, trends like complexity trends, Adam mentioned. Yeah, if you show where you are going and you have like a graph of okay, it's getting more complex, business people can get what you're talking about. And if you can attach money value to this, like the cost of the business, then I think you have a pretty strong case.
Yeah, and I think usually the cost is that you're not doing what you want to do, right? Like it's detracting from the work that you want to do. So that is the incentive, right? You'll try to make the case in that way.
That's true. Okay, next question. This one is from me actually. How do you handle developers leaving while they are working on the rewrite? So that's from I can add some context. I'm working on such a project, not exactly a rewrite, but we're working on a payment system with a cart, and it has been a couple of years, and developers attempted to redo it from scratch in the past, but these people left, and like all of these people left progressively. Like the turnover is 2 years in the company, and now we have two APIs. So we had one problem, now we have two problems. We're recovering it, but I'm wondering if you're working in a company and the developers, they get involved into this rewrite project, and then the rewrite project takes a lot of time and they leave. How do you handle such a situation, because it put the project in jeopardy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can give a little bit of context on the rewrite at Songcake. So we were at the time maybe 10 to 15 developers in the team, or maybe, yeah, between that. When we started the project, we started with just two of us, like trying it out and prototyping it and making sure that it worked. As soon as we were happy with that pattern of rewrite and we had a good approach for it, we started bringing people in. So in pairs. So we would have, this pair is going to work on this flow. And then we would train them and like share with them what we've learned, and or even one of us would pair with a new folk in the pair, if that makes sense. So we kind of spread the knowledge by pairing and bringing more people in. So eventually, at some point, we had all developers in the team working in that rewrite, and that allowed us to move super fast. So, and then as soon as we were happy with it and done the bulk of it, we started taking people out of that. So I guess pairing would be the first one, and then making sure that you get a rotation. I'm sure some folks might be interested in it or just trying it out for a bit and then moving on to something else. So you can do that, like bringing people in and out of the project. That would be my idea.
Nice. Yeah, reduce the risk. Good idea. I think also what you mentioned earlier in your talk, it was probably not the right time, because when they started doing that, there was like less than 10 developers. So really each developer was really important. And of course, when they left,
Yeah.
it was terrible. I think at that time, only two developers were working on this part of the code base. So
Yeah, I think you need for any project, right? You ideally want to reduce the number of or increase the number of people that are aware of it, especially if it's such an important one. So bringing people in and pairing.
thank you. Next question. Do you have any advice to write good backlogs for these types of projects? I think that sometimes the tickets become too technical. So I think it's about the like how do you describe how the issue description and things like that. It tends to become very technical. So the communication. Now, how do you write a good picture of this?
That's a good question. I guess if you're deep into the technical migration phase of it, so the trying to clean up as fast as you can, it will be technical, right? That's unfortunate, but that's the state that you're in. So there might be like tickets that are more technical than others. But I think if you frame it as what is the valuable user facing change that you're making, so what is the user facing part of the system that you're rewriting, and frame it as that as the main ticket or the main story that you're writing, that really helps. So in the example that I gave, it would be adding a new customer or finding a customer and kind of just rewriting that in those terms. I don't know if that helps.
I think I would I would think something similar. So like maybe you, if you're worried to have too much technical content in the main ticket, as you said, you focus on the business value, and then eventually you link to another ticket, which is the technical details for people interested. But yeah, you probably need both.
Yes.
All right, we're getting to the end. There's a one last question from me also, which is so I really like that you mentioned getting used to inconsistencies, because that's also what I experience. The code base is big, too big for us, and we want to change direction because we know better or we learn better, but we cannot cover everything. So we now have to decide between, do we want to do the new way, but it's inconsistent, or we keep it the old way. So you say get used to inconsistencies, and I realized that some people are reluctant to that. It's hard for them to get used to this. They really like the consistency of the patterns, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, do you have any advice on how to get people used to this, or like make it easier for them to be in such a state?
Yeah, I mean, I relate, right? I also don't like, right? Ideally, I would want everything to look perfect. But yeah, I think one thing that helps is to create boundaries between, what's the best practice and what is the old way, right? So make sure that where the best practice is, it's really clear. Like, this is what good looks like for us today. So if you can create separations or seams across the areas of the code that are, this is legacy, we're not touching it, not good best practice, don't follow this pattern, this is what good looks like and this is what you should follow, and try to create those kind of components. I don't know, depending on the language you're using, but the pattern, be really clear what good looks like and what is kind of the legacy pattern. And then that also helps, because then when you're seeing code and it is the legacy pattern, you're going to spot it and oh, maybe I should rewrite it to be the new the best practice that we have. Yeah, and I think celebrating that you're doing this migration little by little, it really helps, because it's going to take a long time to do that. So yeah, making sure folks can see that, if they do invest in that and making it better is going to be a good thing. And if you can automate those changes, definitely do it, right? I don't know if there are tools that you can use in the language that you have to make those changes, sweeping changes, that's amazing, but it's not true for every change. So yeah, it's life.
That's true. Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's a very good advice, because I can think. For example, I work in JavaScript, TypeScript, and yeah, there are some tools that can automatically change a pattern to another on your code base using the abstract syntax tree, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And usually we don't think about that, but yeah, that's a good advice, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. For everyone, I remind you, so this talk will be available on the YouTube channel. You will get the link. The slides also will be available here. Sabrina will share that with you. So thank you very much, Sabrina, for this. It was very great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, we're gonna take a 12 minutes break, and we see you all in 12 minutes. All right. Thank you.